Hello everybody, this is Bret Norman. I'm going to re-upload this version of Codeword Barbelon number 17, The Origin and Mission of the Society of Jesus, Part 2. And the reason I have to do this is because I got a play match on the material that I used out of the Luther movie. And I am blocked in Austria and Germany. And I just want to make sure that my Austrian and German subscribers can get this video. And also for Jörg Glismann in the future on Joggler66, that when he re-uploads this, he can play this in Germany and Austria as well. It's really important not to get those play matches so we're blocked in any countries and hopefully not run into any issues in the future. So without further wait, we'll get right into the video.
My son, I know you desire to be a faithful servant of Christ and his church. I am here to help you. Stand on your feet, my son. What do you have to say?
Have I erred?
Yes, you have erred.
How? That I may avoid such error again.
You have erred by teaching new doctrines.
Which of my teachings is offensive to Rome?
For one, indulgences. Pope Clement's decree, Unigenitus, clearly states that the merits of Christ are a treasure of indulgences.
Acquired. I'm sorry, Your Grace. I think you'll find it says, the merits of Christ acquired a treasure of indulgences.
I am not here to wrangle with you.
No, Your Grace. But Unigenitus was issued 175 years ago, and were this decree not so embarrassing to our church, perhaps it would not be commonly called extravagante, and left out of most collections of canon law. It contradicts Manomitan.
Our present Pope Leo is in harmony with Clement's decree. And there ends the matter.
The honor of the papacy is not preserved by the naked assertion of papal authority, but by safeguarding the Pope's credibility and the clear testimonies of divine scripture.
The Pope interprets scripture.
He may interpret it, but he is not above it.
He was to say one word.
We both know the selling of indulgences have no scriptural support. If common people could read the Bible for themselves, they would understand just how broad the church's interpretations are.
That is outrageous. The scriptures are too complex for even the average priest to understand, much less the common man. Indulgences are an established tradition which give comfort to millions of simple Christians.
Comfort, Your Grace, I'm not interested in comfort. Comfort is not the issue.
So you consider your discomfort more important than the survival of Christianity?
I'm interested in the truth.
The truth. The Turks are building armies on our eastern borders. We are on the brink of war. To the west lies a world of souls who have never heard the name of Christ. That is the truth. Christianity is tearing apart. And just when we need unity most, you create confusion.
My goal is not to quarrel with the Pope or the Church, but to defend them with more than mere opinion. The gospel cannot be denied for the word of man.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the reading and discussion of the book Codeword Barbelon with myself, Bret Norman, and with Jörg Glismann. Glismann. I'm just waking up and having my coffee here in frozen Minnesota, and I'm not sure if Belgium's that cold. I don't think it's that cold there, but how you doing over there, Jörg?
Oh, it is not that cold. No, yesterday evening it started to snow, but just a little bit. It didn't.
Oh, it did? Wow.
There's even nothing left of it anymore.
Right. But
this morning it was a little bit white that you could see, but I could even go with my bicycle to the massage where I went this morning, and
Great.
then I took the dog for a walk for about an hour.
So you get those blustery winds there, I bet. Yeah.
There's nothing white left anymore, and the temperature is above 0 degrees centigrade all day.
Yeah.
I think about 4 or 5 degrees or something like that. So
great. Well,
it's okay, but the wonderful thing is it's a clear day. I see the sun today.
Really? Beautiful.
Yeah, and it has been
All right.
it has been in the last more than 2 months. It has every day been clouded and rainy and everything. So
that'll
we
lift
really
your
haven't seen the
spirits.
sun
Yeah,
a lot, and
that's
even
good.
since the beginning of December. And so it feels very nice to have a day that is sunny from the
Yeah.
morning on. And now it is
I
in
bet.
the afternoon, 4 o'clock, and it's still sunny. And
Good.
that's wonderful to then open the book and do another reading, of course.
All right. So here we are on page 92. If our listeners have a copy for themselves, and I highly recommend that they get a copy now. And if they don't have one already, that is, because, you know, some of our listeners might have this book already, I hope. That'd be great. So.
Okay, then I'm going to continue reading there. We are still reading in chapter 8 of the book Codeword Barbelon, the sons of Loyola and their plans for world domination. Chapter 8 is called The Origin and the Mission of the Society of Jesus, and we were just getting to get acquainted with Martin Luther. And we are now on the top of page 92, continue reading about how Martin Luther even survived the church ban, because he has been excommunicated in 1520 because he didn't want to recant of all his work. And he didn't recant there in the edict of, I always say, at the Diet of Worms, where he was put before the emperor, and he didn't revoke his word. And then he got excommunicated. And then, of course, later on, he burned the bull of excommunication, which bore the title Exsurgi Domine. And I made a video about that in the playlist about Against the Roman Papacy, an institution of the devil. You can look that up. It's called Exsurgi Domine, papal bull of excommunication for Martin Luther. And there I speak about that. And of course, the idea of Rome, of the Pope, of the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, of the system of the Antichrist, when they excommunicate someone, the idea is that somebody else will pick it up and kill that person along in the way, because that even is a meritorious work. That is what the Roman Catholic Church teaches, and that is what they write in their Directorium Inquisitorium that you can read about in Rulers of Evil, where I spoke about that. But Martin Luther wasn't such an easy catch. He was protected all his life. And we are going to continue now on the top of page 92, where we read, Rome made various attempts at silencing the German monk. New bulls and papal curses were sent out against him, but all to no avail. In reply, Luther wrote from Coburg numerous letters and pamphlets which, quote, like discharges of musketry, spread confusion in the enemy's camp, unquote. Many were Luther's personal antagonists, hopeful champions who weighed in on the papal controversy, seeking their own glory as much as that of the churches. The ablest of them was a Dr. John Eckius, or Dr. Eck, the famed debater of Europe, chancellor and professor of scholastic theology at the University of Ingolstadt. That is the German Jesuit stronghold Ingolstadt in Bavaria, and that is the same university where later on Adam Weishaupt was a teacher, a professor of canon law in that Jesuit university in Ingolstadt. But the Jesuits at this time, of course, have not been founded yet. The weapons he wielded were great, deep learning, his sharp dialectic powers, and his vain sophistical skills. When these failed, he vaunted the wares, the dogmas, and fables of Rome. But even as he was no equal to the wit, the clarity of thought, the knowledge in scripture, or the classical learning of Luther, Eck was soon vanquished, discombobulated,
yeah.
Discombobulated.
You never
That's a
seen
new
that
word for
word
me.
before, yeah.
No, that's a new from
Discombobulated, yeah, that's a rare one.
And what does it mean?
Oh, it's really screwed up. I don't know. Something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eck was soon vanquished, discombobulated, and the papal throne seemed once again about to totter. One after another, the opponents of the Reformation inveighed against Luther, but each time they were forced to retire from his presence, discomforted. to maintain its dominance and advantage in ecclesiastical and world affairs, Rome saw that it needed not a champion, but a militia. At the time of the Crusades, it was the Templars who fulfilled that role. Now that Luther's teaching, like a sledgehammer, challenged her dogmas and threatened to batter her very foundations, who would come to the rescue? Writes historian World Domination, a wonderful work that he wrote on the history of Protestantism. Quote, "The history of Rome is summed up in this expression of St. Paul, quote, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof," unquote, as we can read in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 5. And so without that power from on high, she must resort to force or trickery, or even both. Rome saw that she needed a different company of warriors, a 16th century equivalent to the Templars of 200 years before. It was at that time when the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century was gaining the upper hand and seemed on the point of a glorious victory that hell raised up a corps of men unlike any other before or since. A certain Ignatius de Loyola made his grand appearance upon the stage of conflict. There we go into the founding of the Jesuit order right now. It was really the last stroke that Rome could get. And there's even another interesting story that is not covered in this book. And I don't want to go too far into that, but just want to mention it. Some years ago, I made a video on Hour of the Truth, where, among others, also, I think Tom Friess was part of. And it was nothing but the truth, the Sabbath question. Why didn't the reformers go all the way? Mm-hmm. And in that broadcast, we learned that the Archbishop of Reggio was the one who saved the Council of Trent from the Protestants, because the Protestants had so strong arguments that the Roman Catholic Church actually seemed to be willing to lay down their dogmas and return to biblical Christianity, believe it or not, until the Archbishop of Reggio in the 17th section of the Council of Trent cried out that the Protestants are just rebels because they have no other authority but the Roman Catholic Church when they worship on Sunday instead of the seventh day, Saturday, the Sabbath of the Bible. And from that moment on, the Council of Trent took a complete other direction and ended with 125 anathemas, curses on the Protestants, who were just seen as rebels because they did not do what they declared they did, that is, adhering to the Bible and the Bible alone, sola scriptura. And that Archbishop of Reggio made that very clear when he said, "You have no other authority but the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church when you change your seventh-day Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Therefore, you are just rebels, because you are not, because you are compromising. Let me say it this way. You are compromising the Word of God because you adhere to Sunday worship and not to Saturday worship, to the real biblical Sabbath." Very, very important point. And you can look that up in the archives of Nothing But the Truth. Why didn't the reformers go all the way? The Sabbath question. It's about a 3-hour broadcast as far as I remember. And it is great to have a look at that. And there's also documented, there are the documents in that you can see of that Archbishop of Reggio. And of course, there's a book where you can get that, where that is mentioned. But when you turn to the online version of that book, that page where that is written, that page is not available anymore. Of course.
How convenient.
How convenient. Yeah, I did a lot of research on that, but...
oh, wow. Yeah,
anyway,
it's kind of like the
used...
Catholic Encyclopedia, Jörg, the 20... or I'm sorry, the latest one you can find on newadvent.org. Almost everything is in there, except for, of course, the few things that we've discussed before.
Yeah, about the coronation oath, for
Yeah,
example,
the
and things like
coronation
that.
oath. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to even go more into that, and certainly don't start another Sabbath question, because people always think that they have made up their mind and they understood it. Anyway, I don't care for that, what people think anymore. But the point is that in the Council of Trent that took place between 1545 and 1563, that's 18 years, but it was not an 18-year-old council. It was interrupted 3 times. And in the 17th session, the Archbishop of Reggio actually called out the Protestants for the hypocrites that they are. That when they say they adhere to sola scriptura, the Bible and the Bible alone, but for their veneration of Sunday service, they only adhere to the power of the Church of Rome, because that is nowhere in the Bible. And that is what the Roman Catholic Church states itself. So, but let's continue here on page 93 with the foundation of the Jesuits now on August 15th, which we know of course today as Assumption Day. August 15th was made the Assumption Day of Mary, and the Jesuits, Ignatius of Loyola, he, how do you say that? He built his whole study, his whole spiritual exercises and the Society of Jesus on Mary. He devoted that to Mariology. Yeah. So it is no coincidence that on August 15th in 1534, this mystagogue, so this is Ignatius of Loyola, launched his new order in virtual obscurity. Inigo de Loyola, as he was called then, because he has a lot of names. Don Ricalde was another name that was quite his birth name. Ignatius was just later on when he Romanized his name, like I Romanized Donaldus Tramphius, as you remember from Hour of the Truth there.
Yes.
Yeah? But Inigo de Loyola, as he was called then, doubled his new order, the Company de Jesus, or Company of Jesus. That date must forever occupy the least distinguished place among the great days of history, for it spelled, quote, a backward step from light into darkness, unquote. As in the figure of speech, the smoke of Satan arose out of the bottomless pit, darkening sun and air. Of such the prophet Amos said, quote, they turn judgment into wormwood and thrust down righteousness to the earth, unquote, as we can read in Amos chapter 5, verse 7. Signifying thereby, in the spiritual sense, the mixing of truth with falsehood, meaning mixing the holy with the profane. John Addington Simons writes that it is to such men, i.e. the Jesuits, that we owe the conceits of pulpit oratory, its artificial cadences and flowery verbiage, its theatrical appeals to gross sensations, which still leavens Christendom. Yes,
wow.
To this day.
Yeah, very important paragraph here.
Yeah, interesting sentence that I'm going to read once again.
Yes.
John Addington Simons writes that it is to such men, because of the Jesuit, that means, that we owe the conceits of pulpit oratory, its artificial credences and flowery verbiage, its theatrical appeals to gross sensations, which still leavens Christendom. We have to understand here, when it says which still leavens Christendom, we have to understand Christendom in 2 ways. We have to understand Christendom in the way that it is really meant to be, means Christendom outside of the Roman Catholic Church, because we are all under the tutelage of the Jesuits, whether we want it or we don't, whether we believe it or we don't, because we are growing up in an education system that is formed and controlled by the Jesuits. So it leavens real Christendom, and of course it leavens also quote-unquote Christendom when we are going to call the Roman Catholic Church Christians. Yeah? This is something I think is very important, that we make this distinguishing here. This distinguish. How do you say that?
Yeah, that's
this
right.
distinction. We have to make this distinction here. That here in this case, Christendom can mean both. It can mean real, true biblical Christendom on the one hand, but it can also mean the false Christendom, which calls itself Roman Catholicism. Huh?
Yeah, that's the hard part about it, Jörg. You got it. Yeah, is there is such thing as pure doctrine, but how rare is that?
Yeah, the pure doctrine only comes from the Bible, Bret.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And only someone that is determined to put that into practice can do it.
And that's why that was such an important point with the Archbishop of Reggio in the Council of Trent.
Oh, yeah.
Because there he really put the finger in the wound.
Yes, he did. He did. And rightly so, I guess.
And rightly so, yeah.
Yeah.
I said it already in the past. This is probably the only time that I ever agree with a Roman Catholic cardinal or bishop.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Very significant.
One of the rare moments where he spoke the truth.
Yep, that's right.
Now, the author continues, when the Jesuits entered the fray, which significantly was the same year England separated from Catholic authority, meaning 1534, the Protestant Reformation was on the verge of obliterating a Catholic Church in tatters. By 1550, the Reformation seemed about to enjoy a sweeping triumph in Poland, Hungary, Austria, Belgium, Bavaria, and the Rhineland. Yeah, for Bavaria, I have to take a little bit of the triumph away, because I know that even in 1560 in Bavaria, when you were owning a Bible in your own language, you were still put to the stake.
Really?
Bavaria, yeah,
wow.
Bavaria, the southern part of Germany,
Harsh.
who all the guys love because of football, Munich and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That has been arch-Catholic always, and Reformation never really took place there. But on the other hand, also Nuremberg is a city in the north of Bavaria, and we know from the town hall of Nuremberg that it has above its two entrances the four figures of the Daniel prophecy.
That's right. That's right.
The beast of Babylon and Medo-Persia and Greece, and the unspeakable beast of the fourth kingdom. And that is in Nuremberg, and Nuremberg is in northern Bavaria. Okay.
Interesting.
Luther's teachings freed men from the Babylonian captivity of the church. This is a paper that Martin Luther wrote, The Babylonian Captivity of the Church. And he wrote that in 1520, and when you want to learn about that, go to First Amendment Radio. And Tom Fress, in a few months ago or a few weeks ago, worked through that paper, The Babylonian Captivity of the Church, from Martin Luther, and explained that in his reading, and you can find that in a playlist on First Amendment Radio. Yeah? So Luther's teaching freed men from the Babylonian captivity of the Church, an era of both intellectual and spiritual darkness, when the Church of Rome had reduced its subjects to religious slaves, and the religion of Jesus Christ was almost annihilated. The Reformation sought to enfranchise the people, to restore their liberty of conscience, thus depriving the Roman priesthood of its claim to a monopoly on religion. But for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Luther had exploded onto the scene to confront the Romish Church, and the rock of St. Peter, the Pope, was terribly shaken by the spiritual dynamite of this Reformation. Rome reacted slowly at first, but it did react. And boy, what a reaction it was. Loyola and his Jesuits were launched. It was at the height of the process of reviving and reforming of both church and society that this sorcerer's apprentice with his priestcraft appeared from nowhere to overthrow it. Said Dr. Wiley, this is James Atkin Wiley, in the History of Protestantism, Volume 1, quote, "Nothing more unfortunate could have happened for the cause of the world's progress, for the revival of ancient learning, for a spirit of free inquiry and a thirst for rational knowledge, for a society that was casting off the yoke of antiquated prejudices and terrors, and a world that was about to make good its escape from the Dark Ages, when, lo, the Dark Ages started up anew." Unquote. Loyola and his corps of men would put a stop to the steady advances of the Reformation. Reversing the tide of events, they did the very work that the mischievous Sanballat had essayed to do to the Jews who were seeking to build up the broken down walls of Jerusalem, which were lying in waste, consumed with fire. There we can read in Nehemiah chapter 2, 10 and 41 about. For the reader who may not appreciate the analogy, in a nutshell, at one time in the history of the Jews, after they had just come out of the 70 years in Babylonian captivity, they set to work rebuilding their city and its walls under the prophet Nehemiah. But the evil Sanballat and his men, quote, conspired together to come and fight against Jerusalem and to hinder it, unquote. Likewise, Loyola proposed a counter-reformation to Luther's work of emancipation. This counter-reformation would have three sharp weapons or aspects: a corps of men called the Jesuits, the Inquisition, and the Council of Trent, the three monuments of antiquity. The Council of Trent, that took place between 1545 and 1563, was Rome's formal and public response to the threat of the Protestant Reformation, but the Jesuits were its secret weapon. As one author astutely observed, quote, "Every time there is a crisis in the Catholic Church of extraordinary value, new Masonic orders are called forth, and that is how the Jesuit came into being." Unquote. That was why the quote-unquote Masonic Order of Loyola was formed, to rally the forces of evil and repair the damage which Luther had inflicted on the mighty Catholic Church. Yeah, a lot of people are going to say now, but the Jesuits are a Roman Catholic order. They are a papal knight order. If you want to, they are the militia of the Pope. What do they have to do with Freemasonry? Freemasonry is forbidden by the Roman Catholic Church.
Yeah, right.
You know, the Jesuits are the revived Templars.
Yeah.
Not with so many words, but a little bit. P.D. Stuart said that where we were reading here, that you can understand it, that after the abolishing of the Templars in 1307 in the 14th century, here in the 16th century, about 300 years, 200 something years later, 300 some years later, 200 some years later, we see the revival of the Templars in the form of the Jesuits. And when you want to understand how the Jesuits really are the revived Templars, then read Rulers of Evil and the story that Tapasauci put there together about Loyola's founding and starting years. So these are the years even before 1534, when they founded the order in Paris, in France. And before 1540, the order was ordained by Antichrist Pope Paul III. Tapasauci goes into that extensively, and also the voyage that he takes to Malta, the voyage that he takes to Jerusalem, because that's on the way to Jerusalem that he's stranded in Malta, and all what happened there. And then you will learn that the Templars, or the Jesuits, are the revived Templars, and the Jesuits were the ones who founded the Freemasons.
That's right.
and they control the Freemasons. And you don't have to believe me, you can also turn to authors like Petrova Helena Blavatsky. I don't know in which book it was. It was whether in ISIS Unveiled or it was in The Secret Doctrine. And there you can read that when you trace Masonry from the bottom to the absolute top, you will come to a man formed in dark. That is the superior general of the Society of Jesus, who is on the top of all of Freemasonry. Tom Friess put that very eloquently some time ago. He said, Freemasonry is just the Protestant arm of the Jesuit order.
That's right.
And we have to understand, and I think nobody who will listen to this has a problem with that, because they all listen to the episodes we did on the oath of the Jesuits. We know that the Jesuits always control both sides. So when Freemasonry is one side and Roman Catholicism is the other side, the Jesuits have to be on the top of both sides to control them.
Right.
And that's what they do.
Yep.
If they cannot get you with Roman Catholicism, they will get you with deism. They will get you with the Rotary clubs and the things that you think they are so wonderful to do, and the Freemasons are just wonderful people, until you get into the high grades.
That's right.
Because before you are a 30-degree Freemason, I can tell you, you know nothing of the real secret agenda of Freemasonry. Esoteric and exoteric knowledge means the knowledge for the initiated and the knowledge for the not initiated. And even when you are a 3rd, 4th, 10th, or 12th degree Freemason, you are not initiated into the real knowledge. Let me assure you that. And as long as you are not initiated in that, you have no idea what it's all about. Yeah?
Not only that, you're initiated into an occultic ritual that is very, very, very diabolically dangerous. And
sure.
You are a vassal of the devil.
Always when you are a member of any kind of secret society, because, you know, Jesus Christ didn't do anything in secret.
So the idea that you got to become a member to learn what's really going on is just ridiculous. Come on.
Yeah, that's like this.
That's childish thinking.
That's like the serpent that beguiled Eve and said, "Yea, hath God said?"
Yeah, exactly.
It always comes back to the same, Bret.
Mm-hmm.
And there it's nothing different. But we really have to understand that Freemasonry was founded by the Jesuit order. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And this why it says here, every time there is a crisis in the Catholic Church of extraordinary value, new Masonic orders are called forth, and that is how the Jesuits came into being. That was why the Masonic Order of Loyola was formed, to rally the forces of evil and repair the damage which Luther had inflicted on the mighty Catholic Church. Listen, there's a wonderful book that I'm going to read in German, first and for all, from Griesinger. I spoke about that, I think, in the last session, right?
That's right.
And that Griesinger wrote that book in German, and he wrote that book in English. Yeah? In English, it is called The Jesuits, a complete history of their open and secret proceedings from the foundation of the order to the present time. Now, in the beginning of that book, I'm trying to see if I can find that here, he starts this book with a poem in German. And the shame is only that that poem, of course, is translated into English, but of course in English it doesn't rhyme. Okay?
Right.
Now I'm going to read it to you in English anyway, and then you will understand why the Jesuit order had been founded and why it had to be founded by Ignatius of Loyola. Okay? We read on page 16 in the book by Griesinger, and I'm reading the English translation of this. The devil sat in hell and what's that one? And Don bled himself up with pain, because of the monk Luther was courageous enough to encroach on the round world and to upset the old order of things. Is it not sufficient, he screamed, that it resounds from afar that the wicked one dares to venture an attack on the spiritual power? Must he also be bold enough to turn everything upside down in my own kingdom and dominion? By my grandmother, he has taken up a position and will rot in hell if I do not, and will rot in hell if I do not oppose him by a greater power. And who will help me in this severe exigence when the world threatens to depart from its course? Thus howled Satan and flogged his brains in such a way as to make his black forehead the color of blood. At this juncture, the serpent approached him, that old poisonous beast, who nearly burst his belly with malice, deceit, and cunning, and whispered softly a couple of words into his ear. The devil lost not a syllable in his innermost thoughts. Up he sprang, and his swollen breast was relieved, and his eye shone again with pleasure and lust. 9 months after that, a woman gave birth to a youngster whose name was Don Inigo de Loyola. This, of course, doesn't sound as well as when you read the German one, which is a wonderful rhyme, but it gives you an idea about how the devil was pregnant with giving actually birth to Ignatius of Loyola. Ignatius of Loyola is purely a son of the devil, and so is every superior general of this so-called Society of Jesus.
Oh, no
They
doubt.
are the real, quote-unquote, vicars of Christ. They are the real vicars of Satan on earth. And in this little poem, which is not a poem when I read it in English, you have an idea about that. And this is really a wonderful book of Griesinger. And when I have the time, I will also read it, of course, in English, but I cannot promise that right now.
Right. Well, it's interesting because, if you just, I don't know, you've never been to a church, Jörg, but, I'm using myself as an example here, just so everyone knows, is that, if you are a member of a church, you go to church every Sunday, you have this ritual you're in, and you get in this training. It's like your brain is trained to be a certain way. You dress properly, and you do this and you do that, and you have these church tasks and all this. But once you have been, how can I say, woken up to the truth of what these rituals are, how they were developed, and that the Bible itself isn't even being taught in these churches, you have to learn how to separate yourself from them. And, it's like these Jesuits, they're everywhere, man. I mean, it's incredible how this works. Their system works. It's both a church system and a state system, both, and they work together. It's just incredible.
That's why it was so important for the Jesuit order to secularize. That was done with the banishment of the order in 1774 by the Pope.
Yeah,
that was all a trick that the whole general office of Lorenzo Ricci was working for in the time of 1758 until 1776 and even beyond. That was his devotion of his generalate to secularize the order. So they got banned in different European countries in that time. Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, I don't know. I don't care for all the countries. It doesn't matter.
Right.
And then in 1774, Pope Clement XIV forbade or abolished the order with the papal bull Dominic Ac Redemptor, and he was killed for that. He knew he was killed for that, but anyway, he was a child of the Jesuits. He was he was a child of Ignatius Loyola. He got his cardinalship and his papacy only because of Lorenzo Ricci. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And what they did at that time was actually, in a way, fulfilling Bible prophecy, because I think this is also a way that you can understand Revelation 13 and the deadly wound, or the wound that seemed deadly. I saw one of his heads as it was wounded to death. What is one of his heads? Well, one of his heads can also be the Jesuit order. And it was wounded, and it seemed like it was killed, because it was officially abolished by a papal bull.
Yep.
But 41 years later, in 1814, Pope Pius VII established another bull and reinstalled the Jesuits in all glory, and with all power that they had before, and even with powers they didn't have before. Yeah. So this also is a revival of this wound. I think that in this case, you can interpret the Bible in different ways. You can, of course, understand Revelation 13 and the wound that was afflicted to the beast, as many people see it, the end of the temporal power of the Pope. Some say 1798, like the SDA. I say in 1866, and
Yes.
then coming, of course, Vatican I, where the Pope, in the time that he didn't have any temporal power until 1929, he was exceedingly abusing his spiritual power, especially with Vatican I, and making enforcing the Roman Catholic dogma of papal infallibility.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that he could do at that time because he didn't have any temporal power anyway. He was locked in the Vatican. No pope between 1870 and 1929 ever left the Vatican after they were elected, because that was the place where they were put in prison. But the prison, the prison key, the key to the prison was on the inside. The Pope held it themselves. Until 1929, Mussolini, with the Lateran Treaty, gave the Pope back the temporal power. Yeah? So you can see the wound as afflicted in Revelation 13. You can see that, of course, as whether 1798 or 1866, the losing of the temporal power of the Pope on the one hand, but you can also see it as the forbidding of the Jesuit order in 1774, and then popping up again in 1814 or 1773, and popping up again in 1814, 41 years later. You see, I think it is not wrong to have different points of understanding in that, because they would all fit God's words.
Oh, absolutely right. And it was pointed out by both Alexander Hislop and Henry Grattan Guinness, right? In their books, was it...
you mean the time between 606 and 1866?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that was pointed out by Henry Grattan Guinness in Romanism and the Reformation.
That's
and
right.
In Alexander Hislop, the two Babylons.
The two Babylons, yep.
And there are probably also other works where that is mentioned.
Right.
Of course, Martin Luther goes into that extensively in
That
his
too.
Against the Papacy.
Yes, isn't that amazing?
And he names all the other names involved in that, Emperor Phocas, and he calls all the quote-unquote popes of Rome before Boniface III, who came into power in 606.
Yes.
He calls all the quote-unquote popes before that just the bishops of Rome, because that's what they were.
Right.
They were not popes, they were just the bishop of Rome. But through the power of the then ruling emperor of the Roman Empire, Emperor Phocas, who reigned from Constantinople in that time, he gave the spiritual power to the Bishop of Rome at that time, Boniface III, and by that made him Pope.
Yes.
Because he was the first Bishop of Rome who called himself Universal Bishop.
Yes.
Pontifex Maximus. Yeah. So this is a thing I think we can discuss about for hours, you know.
Oh yes.
And it is so interesting, and it is so interesting to reveal that history. But what we should never leave an eye of, what we should never leave our focus out of, is that the Bible in Revelation 13, and that is my personal opinion, can be interpreted in numerous ways in that way.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
There is not only one right way. There are a few things that happened in the past that can give you the idea of there is a head that was wounded. That could have been the Jesuit order on the one hand, and that could be the temporal power of the Antichrist, of course, on the other hand.
That's a really good point. Yep.
The one interpretation, Bret, and that is the most important part that we have to understand, the one interpretation does not exclude the other interpretation.
That's right. No.
It just depends on what point of view that you have on that. And I think that if you allow both point of views to come into your mind, you will even gain a better understanding.
I agree.
Because what were the Jesuits actually abolished for in the end of the 18th century? That had to be a game. Because Roman Catholic canon law says that a bull, a papal bull, is the highest paper order a pope can order, a pope can publish. And that becomes directly Roman Catholic canon law, and it cannot change, and it cannot be taken away. So when one pope issues a bull that abolishes the order of the Jesuits, and 41 years later another pope comes that re-establishes the Jesuits and makes that other bull null and void, what is their quote-unquote law worth anyway?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not worth anything to me.
And we have to understand that with the founding of the United States of America, it was important to secularize the order of the Jesuits.
Oh, yes. Yep.
It was important to get Jesuits in every realm of society.
Yeah, and
that
they're
they
so
could
well
be
concealed
teachers in
here,
school,
too.
that they could be
Yep.
workers in the bank, in every kind of public life. They could work in the media. They could work in the banking system. They could work in every system they wanted. You don't know anymore if that is a normal person or if that maybe is a Jesuit, because the Jesuits who are not priests don't wear the priestly garments, but they are Jesuits nevertheless.
Yeah, and it even gets more subtle than that too.
Because with the founding of the United States of America, you had a real rise in the world of quote unquote Protestantism. The freedoms of the people more and more came into living. The years before, we still had a lot of kings and all that stuff. But after the United States of America, who came as the first quote-unquote republic or quote-unquote democracy into being, a lot of other countries became that too all of a sudden. Even in Europe, a lot of kings were all of a sudden abolished. Or the kings were given only a representative status. Like, look at England today. The Queen only has a representative status, like a president of a country. And in Belgium, it's the same. And in Spain, it's the same. And in Denmark, it's the same. And in Norway, it's the same. They still have kings or queens, but these kings or queens only have a representative status. They don't have a power status anymore. The real power lays with the people. That's what they tell you.
Yes,
because
that's
the
what they
Jesuits,
tell
of
you.
course, infiltrated the system of democracy too. That's another case. But if you just keep it real and say, okay, there are these democracies now, people ruling themselves, and the United States of America was the very first great example of that. And France followed with the French Revolution. Yeah.
Right.
You had America on the Western Hemisphere and you had France on the Eastern Hemisphere, I mean, in old Europe. And after France, other countries followed. In the end of the 19th century, with Garibaldi, Italy followed. In 1871, in Germany, with Bismarck, Germany followed and became a republic. Germany still had a Kaiser. They still had an emperor, but that emperor had not that power anymore. It was the republic that had the power.
Yes.
Yeah? And because of that, I think it is absolutely necessary that we understand that the abolishing of the Jesuit order in 1773 happened only to give the possibility to secularize the order. And that today they have two legs to stand on. One is the priestly leg and one is the temporal leg, with every man being a Jesuit but hiding under a quote-unquote civil occupation, be it politician, be it banker, be it in the media somewhere.
Contractor.
and then look around when you study the SMOM, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta.
Yeah.
They have the control of all the things that I've just named.
Same damn
and that
thing.
is a result, and that is a result of the secularization of the order with the abolishing of the order in 1773.
Yeah.
And the more you study these things, the more you see this whole picture.
Oh, absolutely right.
That is so wonderful when all of a sudden the sight is clear, you know?
It is. Yep. And I made that banner for Tom Fress on this video that I've been working on for over a year here on the Global Vatican and Francis Rooney. And, you know, Francis Rooney, I think, has been elected governor or something. He's somewhere in our government. And he's got a couple web pages up. I was reading them, and it's very intriguing. But no, I really think that our listeners, if they haven't checked out Tom's reading of the Global Vatican, that they should definitely go check it out. And, you know, just maybe, they will find it just fascinating like I did and you did, Jörg. It's such a good way to start delving into more research. And
That's true, but there's one thing that I want to mention that is much more important than Tom Fress's fantastic reading of the Global Vatican.
Please.
And that is his reading of Romanism and the Reformation.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
I am still of the conviction that next to the Bible, Romanism and the Reformation from Henry Grattan Guinness is a book that every Bible-believing Christian should have read and understood.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you read your Bible and you have read Romanism and the Reformation, and then you go to Global Vatican, the point is, Romanism and the Reformation was published in 1888. The Global Vatican was published in 2013, if I'm not mistaken. So this is 140 almost years apart, 135 something years apart. In Romanism and the Reformation, you are getting the picture of Rome as it is biblically, as it is historically, and as it is prophetically. And in the Global Vatican and the reading of Tom there, you get a picture of what is Rome present and future. And that gives you the whole picture.
Wow. Yeah, you're right.
It gives you the picture of the biblical aspect, the historical aspect, the prophetic aspect, the present aspect, and the future aspect all
start
together
in
from
the
point
old
of view
world.
today.
Start in the pure faith of a Protestant. What was a pure Protestant? What was a Protestant before 1870? You know, entirely different than today.
Yeah.
Entirely different.
That has mostly to do with the teaching of futurism, of course.
Yep. Yeah, we're not talking about ancient history here, people. It's very recent. You know, the Jesuits are very recent. You know, this is incredible how things have gotten so twisted, and just what are people thinking? They're not thinking. They're just going about their lives. They could care less about the religion. I don't know. Scary stuff, man.
Yeah, I just want to go with a few little quotes here before we continue reading in the book a little bit.
Please, go ahead.
From Henry Grattan Guinness's book, Romanism and the Reformation, on page 304, we read, quote, "The Reformation was not the formation of the church, but its reformation after its ruin by Romanism. Another quote that comes not from that book is, Pentecost formed the church, Popery deformed it, Protestantism reformed it. And futurism is the victory of Romanism over Protestantism. That is something that we have to understand. The Jesuitical lie of futurism is the victory of Romanism over Protestantism. Since we all do not believe anymore that the papacy is the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist, the Jesuits have won. Only when we return to the Bible and the Bible alone, something that even the Archbishop of Reggio in the 17th section in the Council of Trent told the reformers that they didn't do, when we return to real, true, biblical Christianity based on sola scriptura, on the only, in our time, preserved Word of God, the 1611 authorized version of the King James Bible, then we have a chance to pursue Protestantism and to convict other people of the knowledge, not of the opinion, but of the knowledge that Romanism is the last power on earth as it was predicted by the prophet Daniel. And that the papacy is the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist.
Yes, and once you discover that, you'll never go back to anything else. Once you know your Bible enough to realize that these scriptures have been, the manuscripts themselves have been tampered with. And this is a very, how should we say this, political indoctrination as well. It's both spiritual and political. So that's the real point here, is it's a double whammy. People are just so deceived that they can't make sense of it because they haven't been, they haven't formed a pure truth in their mind yet about it, I guess. That's the best way I can say it.
Mm-hmm.
So, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the beginning of this third paragraph on page 94. Because I think this needs a little bit more explanation, and probably with that explanation we will round up.
I agree.
We will round
for it. Yes,
we will round up our broadcast for today.
Yes.
It says here, this Counter-reformation would have three sharp weapons or aspects: a core of men called the Jesuits, the Inquisition, and the Council of Trent, the three monuments of antiquity. So let's first go into the first one, a core of men called the Jesuits. That is the new founded Society of Jesus, the Company de Jesus, or Company of Jesus, as Ignatius Loyola was called with his 6 companions who founded that order in 1534. And if you want to know more about the founding of that, you can turn to a lot of books. Among others, you can turn to Rulers of Evil, and there it is explained how in Montmartre and Notre Dame in 1534, these 6 people took their vows and even dedicated themselves to Mariology. This is point 1. Point 2 is the Inquisition. Tapasansi makes it clear in his book Rulers of Evil that after the ordination of the Jesuit order in 1540 by Antichrist Pope Paul III, 2 years negotiations took place, and at the end of the negotiations in 1542, the Jesuits took over the Inquisition from the Dominican order, because the Dominican friar order of the Roman Catholic Church, which is a monastical order, was the one that had the Inquisition under their yoke from the beginning of the 13th century, from 1203 or something when the Inquisition started. It was the Dominicans who were the ones who executed the Inquisition all over Europe at that time. Yeah. And with the founding of the Jesuits in 1540, the Jesuits, started negotiations with the Dominicans to take over from the Dominicans the power of the Inquisition. All of a sudden now, this new formed order of the Jesuits, of the Society of Jesus, was on the head of the Inquisition. And why is that important? Well, because from the time on there, the Inquisition was not like it was the centuries before, a few monks riding on a car from town to town, picking up heretics, interrogating them, torturing them, and killing them anymore, but the Inquisition became more subtle. The Inquisition was turned into what we know it today, when it works with wars and even world wars, and when it works with quote-unquote regime change, and when it works with things like that even the United States of America soldiers get themselves to work with things like waterboarding, which is not a new inquisitional method of quote-unquote interrogating on another level, as you have some American politicians being said, that this is enhanced interrogation or something. There's nothing new. It's just new fancy terms, because the Jesuits are masters of sophistry and casuistry, and they will use new terms for old things, meaning they will use new, how do you say that, new bottles for old wines.
Right.
Yeah?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But that it still is the same wine or the same vinegar that's in there. Okay? So the Jesuits took over the Inquisition from the Dominican order in the mid of the 16th century because they knew they had to reform the Inquisition. And they did. They did even so far that today the Inquisition is not called the Inquisition anymore. It is not the Holy Office of the Inquisition anymore, but it is the Holy Office of, I don't know. I don't come to that name right now. It doesn't matter. Look it up for yourselves. So we have that corpse called the Jesuits.
Something, Doctrine of the Faith. Forget.
Yeah, Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. You have the Inquisition, and you have, of course, the third one, the Council of Trent. You have to understand that this Council of Trent that started in 1545, just 5 years after the forming of the Jesuit order, that council was not only controlled by the Jesuits were also the one that laid the ground for that council. Now, why is that important? Well, we always say, go to First Amendment Radio and listen to Tom Friess. And Tom Friess, for the moment, is reading Martin Luther's work on the council and the churches. Martin Luther wanted in all the time that even though he was under the ban, under the excommunication ban of Rome, he wanted a free German Christian council all the time. And the Pope never ever gave him that. And why not? Well, because, for example, the Pope was afraid that the same thing could happen that happened already at the Council of Constance, where 3 popes were deposed of. Now, let me ask you, when you're a pope, do you want to go to a council where you know there had been a council that had deposed of 3 popes, so you are going to put yourself into jeopardy to getting disposed of? Are you then in favor of a council? I don't think so. So the German Emperor, Charles V, in the time of the ruling of Martin Luther in Germany, and the different popes, among others, of course, Pope Paul III, who came in the end in 1540, at the end of Luther's life. Before there were other popes, starting with Leo X in the time of his excommunication. Luther always was a propagator for a council. And Luther returned to the teaching that the Pope is not above the council, even though the Pope boasts that he is above the council. And if you want to learn more about this, then get Luther's Works, volume 41. The one where I read, and Tom also, we read the part of the book, the last 150 pages something, Against the Roman Papacy, an institution of the devil. And in the beginning of the book, what Tom is reading right now, in the midst of February 2018, live, you can listen to that, where he reads on Martin Luther on the council and the churches, and he will tell you how Luther was always an advocate for the councils and the return to quote-unquote apostolic Christianity, because he thought that the Roman Catholic Church actually still was Christianity in a way. That was one of the leavens that Martin Luther just couldn't get rid of in his understanding. But that's something else. But Martin Luther was always an advocate for a council. And therefore, it is very important to understand. This is why this Council of Trent, it says here in P.D. Stuart's book, the Council of Trent is one of the main pillars that the Counter-reformation is built upon. The Counter-reformation is built on three pillars: on the Society of Jesus on the one hand, on the Inquisition on the other hand, and on the Council of Trent on the third hand. So if you don't have an understanding of all these three pillars, how can you understand the Counter-reformation?
Yeah, that's right. And they call it the Catholic Reformation as well, to make it even more confusing. You go to school, they'll teach you Catholic Reformation in the theological circles. They don't teach Counter-reformation. That's too old. So, yeah, it's a lot to learn, Jörg, and I think that we've touched on something here that we could explore much deeper if we wanted to. And I have a document. Well, actually, I haven't made a document out of it yet, but I do have a 1605, I'm sorry, 1905 Americana encyclopedia. And if you look up Jesuit in the 1905 Americana, or is it a 1903? I forget exactly what year it is, but it's pretty obvious who wrote about the Jesuits in that encyclopedia. In other words, they don't give you anything that is too controversial, quote unquote. They give you a very controlled definition of a Jesuit. And it would be interesting to send that to you, Jörg, so you could take a look at it sometime. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's just more proof of our heritage here in the United States. We've been, groomed to accept these Jesuits as normal people, and there's nothing odd at all about them because they're given their religious freedom and they can choose to worship how they will. So it's a pretty entangled bit of religious problems we have here. So, Jörg, should we close it up for today?
Yeah, I think we have a little bit over 1 hour, and that is okay for the reading. We will go back to the reading on the bottom of page 94 next time. We didn't read many pages, maybe, but I think what we read was at least I hope that it had quite an impact on the people who were listening and watching.
Sure. And, well, it has an impact on me for sure, and I love talking more about this because you can't say enough about this. This is a very, very sensitive nerve right here in America. And around the world, really, around the world. It's not just America, it's everywhere. So, well, I need to get going here, unfortunately. So,
okay, just round it up.
I will. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on our reading and discussion of the book Codeword Barbelon. And looking forward again to another session with Jörg. And I thank you, Jörg, for your time and energy you've put into doing this reading with me. And look forward to the next one. And I hope everyone's doing great. And take care. And bye for now.